The city pulsed with noise and impatience, and right in the middle of its chaos sat a man no one seemed to notice, though his presence was as steady as the morning sun. He was old, blind, and dressed in a suit that once carried dignity but now sagged tiredly on his thin shoulders. His shoes, though polished, bore the cracks of years, and his cane lay across his knees as if it were his final claim to the world. Beside him, a small metal tin waited with quiet hope, containing nothing more than a few dull coins that clinked weakly whenever the wind rattled past. The man had written a placard with shaky hands, "I cannot see the sun, but I can feel your kindness." And yet, all morning, streams of people had flowed around him like he was a stone in the river, seen but not touched. A banker in a sharp suit walked briskly, eyes fixed on his phone, and dropped a coin without stopping. A young woman carrying shopping bags looked his way with pity, but tightened her grip and turned her face. A group of students passed, laughing, one snapping a picture and posting it for likes before moving on. Even a vendor selling roasted maize nearby muttered, "Later," but never remembered. The old man sat still, whispering thank you to footsteps that never answered, lifting his face toward the sun he could not see, as though the light itself was his only companion. This was not a new day for him. It was the same cruel script that repeated, the same silence disguised in noise. But fate has its way of hiding miracles where no one looks, and sometimes the smallest heart carries the loudest kindness. Far away in the alleys behind the market, under a broken Coca-Cola sign, a boy named Kato stirred awake on a sheet of cardboard. He was 14, but carried himself like someone much older, lean from hunger, sharp from survival. His eyes too serious for a child, yet bright with something the world could not steal: hope. An orphan since he could remember, he had no roof except the open sky, no pillow except his folded arms, and no riches except the memory of a mother who used to whisper, "My son, even if the world forgets you, never forget to do good." Kato washed his face with cold water from a cracked basin, tightened the torn shirt around his waist where buttons were missing, and whispered into the air, as if speaking to his mother's spirit, "Today will be better." He stepped into the streets, where exhaust fumes mixed with the smell of roasting corn and chapati, where horns shouted, and where everyone seemed to be running from or toward something. Kato walked slowly, scanning the ground with sharp eyes for lost coins, screws, or anything he could trade. He greeted shopkeepers who often ignored him and helped a woman lift her basket without asking for pay. He was used to being unseen, just like the blind man at the roundabout, though he did not yet know how close their destinies stood. As he reached the noisy junction, Kato noticed the old man seated on his stool, rain clouds gathering like trouble above his head, and the crowd weaving around him as though he were invisible. The boy stopped, watching carefully, listening to the way the old man whispered soft thanks, even when no one gave him anything. Kato frowned, a feeling of recognition rising in his chest, for he too knew what it was to be invisible, to sit and wait and be passed over by a world too busy to care. He wanted to step forward, but for a moment he hesitated, thinking, "Why me? Why should I help when everyone else pretends not to see?" Yet in his heart, his mother's words pressed again, stronger, "Never forget to do good." And so, even as the city hurried, even as others walked past, one poor orphan stood still, ready to change both his life and the life of the man no one cared to notice.
The clouds thickened, bruising the afternoon sky until the market roofs rattled with sudden rain, sending vendors scrambling to cover their goods and pedestrians dashing under awnings, each person thinking only of their own dry skin. In the middle of the downpour, the blind man sat helpless, his thin blazer darkening with wet patches, his placard sagging as water blurred the words, and the few coins in his tin bowl floated like tiny boats adrift in brown rainwater. Yet no one stopped. Some stared and hurried away, others whispered that he would manage somehow, and a few even laughed at the image of an old man drenched like forgotten laundry. His cane tapped weakly on the ground as he tried to find shelter, his frail hands trembling in the storm, his lips murmuring polite apologies to feet that splashed past without pausing. Then, weaving through the crowd with bare feet slapping against puddles, came Kato, carrying nothing but the stubbornness of his heart. He had just finished helping an old vendor push a basket away from the flooding gutter, and had received in return a stale mandazi he tucked into his waistband, when he heard the sound, tap, 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 like someone calling for help without daring to shout. He followed the rhythm through the rain and found the old man, soaked, shivering, and still whispering, "Thank you," to no one. "Good afternoon, sir," Kato said loudly so the man could follow the sound of his voice. "You are getting wet. Let me move you to shade." The blind man paused, tilting his head, surprised by the tone of concern, and asked softly, "Is that a child speaking?" "Just Kato," the boy answered, gripping the wooden stool with one hand, guiding the man's cane with the other, and leading him carefully beneath the awning of a shuttered boutique where the dripping slowed to a gentle patter. The man settled with a sigh, clutching his chest as if to keep his heart steady. "Thank you, my son. No one wanted to move a wet beggar." But Kato shook his head, his voice firm despite his youth. "You are not a beggar. You are a person in the rain." Those words pierced the man's chest more deeply than any coin ever could, and for the first time that day he smiled. Seeing his shivers, Kato darted to a nearby kiosk, begged a paper cup of hot tea, and brought it back, the steam curling between them like a bridge. The blind man inhaled the warmth, then asked with gentle curiosity, "Tell me, boy, what is the sign of the rain?" Kato grinned faintly, wiping water from his brow, and answered, "That people run past the very thing they are running from." The man chuckled softly, impressed. "A philosopher. Sit with me a while." And so, as the storm washed the city, they sat together, a blind man and a poor orphan, bound not by pity but by recognition. For Kato, it was the first time anyone had called him more than just a hungry street boy. For the blind man, it was the first time all day someone had seen past his cane to the man behind it. The city roared around them, blind in its own way, unaware that destiny had just begun to stitch a new story between an invisible old man and the child who refused to look away.
The rain thinned into a drizzle, and then into silence, leaving the air damp and smelling of wet dust and roasted maize from nearby stalls, while the blind man, now sheltered, cupped the paper of warm tea like it was the first blessing he had touched all day. Kato sat beside him, legs folded, wiping his soaked shirt on his knees and staring at the restless crowd that moved as if no storm had ever passed. The blind man tilted his head toward the sound of people rushing by and said, "It smells like Friday, pay packets, perfume, excitement." And Kato laughed gently, answering, "It smells more like receipts and forgotten change," which made the man chuckle again, delighted that the boy's words always carried sharp truth. Then fate played another trick. A woman in a smart blazer, talking quickly on her phone, rushed past with her handbag unzipped, and as she pushed through the stream of people, a wallet slipped from the bag, spun once on the wet pavement, and slid toward the gutter. Without thinking, Kato leapt up,
darted through the legs of startled strangers and snatched the wallet before the water carried it away. He ran after the woman, shouting, "Madam, madam, your wallet!" She turned, startled, checked her bag, and gasped when she saw the missing piece. "Oh, thank you, boy," she said quickly, her voice clipped with relief but already tilting back toward the phone in her hand. She opened the wallet, pulled out a single coin, pressed it into Kato's palm without looking him in the eye, and muttered, "God bless," before rushing off, heels clicking like punctuation marks in the rain. Kato stared at the coin glistening in his palm, then at her disappearing figure swallowed by the crowd, and laughed, not with bitterness, but with the strange humor of life. Returning to the awning, he showed the coin to the blind man, who asked, "What is funny?" And Kato answered, "People. They rush past their own hearts." The blind man smiled, enjoying the boy's wisdom more than the coin itself. He told Kato, "Keep it. You earned it, twice, once by saving it, once by returning it." Kato slipped the coin into the hidden pocket sewn inside his waistband, the last neat work of his late mother, and patted it with quiet gratitude. The blind man then asked curiously, "Tell me, Kato, how do you know who will never stop for me?" And the boy, glancing at the endless stream of strangers, replied, "They never make eye contact, even with a blind man." The words hung between them like a bell's echo, and the old man's smile deepened into something more solemn. In that moment, though neither of them knew it, a seed was planted, of trust, of destiny, of a bond that would grow into something far greater than either could imagine, as the boy who had nothing gave the gift of honesty to the man who had everything hidden in silence.
By late afternoon, the storm clouds had broken into streaks of orange sunlight, and the roundabout buzzed back to its usual rhythm of honking cars, shouting vendors, and tired commuters dragging feet toward home. Yet under the boutique awning, the blind man and Kato shared a quiet island of stillness, sipping the last of the tea, as if savoring not just its warmth, but the company it carried. It was then the trouble slithered into their peace. 4 boys from the nearby alleys, faces sharp with mischief and hunger for dominance, sauntered close, their laughter carrying that cruel edge that always meant something ugly was about to happen. Their leader, taller than the rest, pointed at the blind man and sneered, "Old man, your sign is wrong. It should say, 'I am hungry because I am lazy.'" The others erupted in mocking laughter, clapping each other's shoulders as if cruelty were entertainment. Kato felt his chest tighten, anger hot in his throat, but before he could step forward, one of the boys darted in, snatched the placard from beside the stool, and waved it high like a stolen flag, dancing backward into the street, while the others jeered. Another boy kicked at the tin bowl, sending coins scattering across the ground like broken teeth, clinking and rolling into puddles, while passersby looked, frowned, and just as quickly turned away. The traffic policeman nearby adjusted his cap and pretended to be busy with his whistle. The maize vendor shook her head, but made no move to help. The city, once again, decided to be blind. Kato, however, could not look away. He lunged forward, chasing the boy with the placard, weaving through startled pedestrians, his bare feet slapping hard against the wet pavement. He knew the alleys better than they did. He cut left, then right, and emerged in front of the thief, blocking his path. "Give it back," Kato said, breathless but steady. The boy smirked, trying to hide his own unease, and taunted, "What will you do if I don't?" Kato didn't shout, didn't threaten. He just stood, eyes locked, silence heavier than anger. The smart cracked, the taunt faltered, and with a frustrated grunt, the boy shoved the placard into Kato's chest before spitting near his feet and retreating to save face. Kato walked back through the crowd, mud smeared across his hands as he wiped the board clean, returning it to its place like a soldier restoring a fallen flag. He crouched down, picking up the scattered coins one by one, each recovery in active defiance against the cruelty that had tried to erase the old man's dignity.
When he finally placed the last coin back into the bowl, he looked up to see the blind man's face turned toward him, calm but filled with quiet pride. "Thank you," the old man said softly. "I heard the world grow quiet, and I knew you were moving." Kato nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat, realizing once more that though many had seen the injustice, only he had chosen to act. Around them, people whispered, but none stepped closer. None apologized. The city remained what it had always been, a place where most walked past. Yet in that moment, as the blind man rested his hand lightly on Kato's shoulder, a bond was sealed, unshakable and unseen, the kind of bond that storms and cruelty could not wash away.
As the sun slipped low, spilling molten gold across rooftops and market stalls, Kato sat cross-legged beneath the boutique awning, staring at the damp placard as if it were a puzzle waiting to be solved. The old man's tin bowl held only a few recovered coins, and though the street had calmed from the earlier commotion, most people still passed with hurried steps, eyes sliding away, ears deaf to gratitude. Kato chewed his lower lip thoughtfully, then turned to the blind man. "May I change the words?" he asked, his voice uncertain but hopeful. The old man tilted his head, sensing something new stirring in the boy's chest, and answered, "Words change worlds, my son. If your heart tells you, then do it." With a stub of charcoal he carried in his waistband for scribbling numbers and little notes, Kato flipped the placard over and carefully wrote each letter with slow determination. "It is a beautiful day. I wish I could see it." He set the board where passersby would read it without needing to pause, and almost instantly the current of the street shifted. A young woman on her way home from work stopped mid-stride, her phone slipping to her side as she read, and for the first time looked at the old man with eyes not of pity but of recognition. A delivery rider braked his motorcycle, squinted at the words twice, and placed a folded note gently into the bowl. A father, leading his small son by the hand, bent down as the child whispered, "Baba, it really is a beautiful day." And together they both placed coins in the tin. Slowly, steadily, the placard worked its quiet magic. The air itself seemed lighter, people lingered, faces softened, and the old man's smile deepened with every clink that fell like gentle rain. "What did you write?" he asked, curiosity sparkling in his blind eyes. Kato repeated the words, and the old man exhaled with wonder. "You did not ask for pity," he murmured. "You reminded them of gratitude." More people came, drawn not by spectacle, but by the pull of honesty, and for the first time all day the bowl filled steadily, not from obligation, but from hearts stirred awake. Among the crowd was a young journalist searching for a human interest story. She scribbled notes, snapped the photograph of the boy crouched beside the old man, and in her mind the headline was already forming, "A sign that taught the city to see." She placed a folded bill into the tin, but before leaving she asked the boy's name, and when he answered Kato, she repeated it softly, as though to make sure it would not be forgotten. The sun sank, the breeze shifted with the smell of chapati and fried fish, and the old man turned to Kato with a gratitude deeper than coins. "Will you come tomorrow?" he asked, his voice carrying a thread of hope. Kato smiled faintly, half joking, "If I eat." The old man placed a trembling hand over the boy's and said with quiet certainty, "Then you will eat, because today you fed the city." And as the city lights flickered awake, it was no longer just an ordinary evening. It was the beginning of a story that would soon change everything. That night, the city seemed to hold its breath.
the moon veiled by restless clouds that dragged shadows across the alleys where Kato returned to his makeshift corner beneath the broken Coca-Cola sign. His belly rumbled faintly from the shared loaf end he had saved, and beside him the stray dog he often fed gnawed quietly on scraps, its ribs sharp beneath patchy fur. Kato clutched the single coin in his waistband pocket like a secret heartbeat, whispering to himself that tomorrow would bring more light, more chances, more words to write. But peace never lasted long in the alleys. Just after midnight, laughter cut through the silence, sharp and mocking, and the same gang of boys who had tormented the blind man earlier appeared, their leader grinning with cruelty. "Philosopher boy!" he taunted, grabbing Kato by the collar and shaking him so hard the coin slipped from his pocket and rang against the wet ground. "Teach us to see this!" The boys cackled as one of them kicked the coin across the alley, making it skid into the darkness. Kato stood frozen, not from fear, but from the weight of helplessness, knowing that chasing would only bring bruises and more loss. They shoved him once, twice, then vanished into the night with their ugly laughter echoing off tin roofs, leaving Kato with nothing but silence and the hungry dog staring up at him. For a moment, despair clawed at his chest. He could cry or rage or curl into sleep and let the night win. But instead, he picked up the coin where it had landed against the wall, brushed off the dirt, and slipped it back into his pocket. He looked at the dog and whispered firmly, "Tomorrow we look for beauty again." As dawn broke, Kato hurried back to the roundabout, his chest eager with hope, only to find the stool empty, the cane gone, the space too clean, as though the old man had never been there. Paddock clenched his stomach. He asked the maize seller, the policeman, the knife sharpener, but all gave the same indifferent shrug. He searched the alleys, the tailor's corridor, even the shuttered boutique, but the blind man was nowhere. Defeated, Kato returned to the bare square of dry dust where the stool had sat and collapsed cross-legged, feeling for the first time the sharp bite of being abandoned. Then, from behind him, a voice warm as tea poured softly into the morning. "I was early. I waited to see if you would come when there was nothing to gain." Kato spun, heart pounding, to see the blind man standing with his cane, smiling faintly. "You came because you promised," the man said, reaching out a hand. Kato nodded quickly, relief spilling into laughter that shook his small shoulders. "I came because I said I would." And the old man answered with quiet gravity, "That is how fortunes find people."
The morning swelled into brightness, the air sharp with the chatter of vendors setting up their stalls, and once more Kato sat beside the blind man at the roundabout, the placard propped proudly in front of them, its words pulling smiles and slowing footsteps. By now, people had grown curious, not of the blindness, but of the transformation. For somehow this ordinary stool had become a place where strangers remembered gratitude, and where coins fell not from pity, but from recognition. Around noon, a familiar figure appeared, the young journalist with her camera slung across her shoulder, her notebook open in her hand. She crouched, asked questions, filmed short clips of coins dropping into the bowl, and recorded Kato's voice as he explained why he had written the words on the board. "People help more," he said, eyes darting to the crowd, "when they first remember they are lucky." She nodded thoughtfully, scribbling every syllable, sensing she had captured something her readers would cling to. Then the moment deepened further. A sleek black sedan rolled up and stopped beside the roundabout.
a car too polished and expensive to belong in the clutter of taxis and boda-bodas. A uniformed driver stepped out, opened the rear door, and a dignified woman emerged, her silver hair tucked under a headscarf, her posture tall, her presence commanding without effort. She crossed the street, ignoring stares, and when she reached the blind man, she did something that froze everyone watching. She knelt before him and clasped both his hands in hers. "Baba," she said softly, her voice breaking with emotion, "we have been searching." The blind man tilted his head, trembling, and whispered, "Aisha?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, uncle, it is me. We thought we had lost you." Gasps rippled through the onlookers, and murmurs began. Who is he? Why such respect? Aisha turned to Kato, her eyes warm, and explained, "This is not just any man. He is Tunde Akande, founder of Akande Holdings." The name darted through the crowd like electricity. People whispered, shocked, recognizing the name of a company whose buildings and foundations shaped the very city they lived in. Kato blinked, staring at the man beside him, stunned that the same blind figure people ignored was in truth a giant hidden in plain sight. Aisha continued, "Uncle wanted to know who still sees people, not wealth, not power, but people. He disguised himself to test hearts. And today," she glanced at Kato with gratitude, "you passed the test." She handed the blind man a sealed envelope saying, "The board is meeting this afternoon. They need you back, and you need someone to help you see the world." Tunde smiled, his face calm but proud, and turned toward Kato's breathing. "Will you come with me?" he asked gently. Kato swallowed hard, unsure, whispering, "As what?" And the blind man answered with a certainty that silenced the crowd, "As the eyes that listen."
The black sedan purred through the city, carrying Kato and the blind man toward a world the boy had only ever glimpsed from the outside. Glass towers rose like monuments, polished lobbies gleamed with marble, and security guards in pressed uniforms opened doors with practiced bows. Kato clutched the edge of his seat, torn between awe and disbelief, his bare feet tucked nervously under him as if they didn't belong on leather car mats. When they entered the headquarters of Akande Holdings, the cool air smelled faintly of polish and wealth, a scent so different from the smoke and dust of the market that Kato felt dizzy. Inside the boardroom, executives in tailored suits turned as Tunde Akande, once ignored on a stool, entered with his cane and the boy guiding him gently. Some faces lit with relief, others tightened with discomfort, for in his absence, greed had taken root. Aisha announced, "Mr. Akande has returned," and silence fell, broken only by the shuffle of papers. The meeting began, charts projected, numbers recited, promises painted in glowing colors, but beneath the polished words was a shadow. Kato sat quietly beside the blind man, listening not to the numbers, but to the voices, hearing cracks others ignored. Hesitation masked with jargon, shallow laughter after empty assurances, the subtle way eyes avoided each other when risk was hidden. At one point, the blind man leaned toward him and asked in a whisper, "What do you hear, my son?" And Kato replied softly, "They are selling rainbows, but they hide the storm." Tunde's lips curved into the faintest smile, and he encouraged, "Then ask them what the storm is." Kato raised his voice, small but steady, cutting through the polished performance. "If this deal is truly safe, why don't your eyes meet when you praise it?"
The words landed like a stone in still water. Some executives chuckled nervously, but the laughter cracked under its own weight. One shuffled papers too quickly, another cleared his throat without answering, and finally the CFO, her face pale but her heart unburdened, admitted, "The risks outweigh the returns. We've been pushing this too far." The illusion collapsed, and the room shifted. Later, in Tunde's private office overlooking the city, the old man turned to Kato with tears hidden behind his blind eyes. From the envelope Aisha had given him, he pulled out 2 papers. "The first," he said, placing it in Kato's trembling hands, "is a scholarship, secondary to university, every cost covered." The boy's breath caught, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The second," Tunde continued, pressing another page into his hand, "is an appointment letter. You will work with the Akande Foundation, starting today, as Junior Community Liaison. Salary begins now." Kato's knees weakened, his voice barely a whisper. "But sir, I only moved you out of the rain." And the old man, smiling with both gratitude and pride, answered firmly, "And you taught a city to look up."
News spread faster than taxis racing down the highway. By evening, the journalist's piece was already circling radio shows, online feeds, and whispered street corners. Her headline bold and irresistible: "Blind millionaire found sitting on the street, saved by orphan boy who changed his sign." The story gripped the city not because of wealth, but because of the unlikely hero, a barefoot orphan who had stopped when everyone else walked past. By morning, the roundabout where the blind man once sat had transformed into a gathering place. People came not just to look, but to act differently. Vendors shared leftover bread with hungry children. The traffic officer kept bottles of water for tired travelers, and the maize seller started a small jar labeled School Shoes Fund. Even the boys who had once mocked Kato returned, their heads lowered, shame heavy in their eyes. They muttered apologies, and instead of chasing them away, Kato shook each hand firmly, turning their apologies into promises as he urged them to join a new youth program the foundation had launched overnight. Meanwhile, Tunde Akande, no longer hidden, but now more respected than ever, continued to sit occasionally at the roundabout, not to test, but to remember. Beside him, Kato sat proudly, not as a beggar's helper, but as the eyes that listened, sipping tea and laughing softly, while the city walked past more slowly now, more willing to see. At the foundation, Kato was given a desk by a wide window where sunlight poured in each morning, and he would tell visitors that he worked in the light, because for too long his life had been shadowed. On the wall behind him hung the framed placard, preserved just as he had written it with his stub of charcoal. "It is a beautiful day. I wish I could see it." Beneath it, he had added one more line in his own handwriting: "So I will help you feel it." People who visited the office often paused before the sign, some wiping tears, others smiling, and many left determined to live differently. And though he now wore clean clothes, ate warm meals, and studied with books instead of scraps, Kato never forgot the alley under the Coca-Cola sign. Every Friday he returned with 2 paper bags, one filled with food for the stray dog who still waited faithfully, and another left on the cardboard pallet where he used to sleep, a small tribute to the boy he once was, the boy who chose kindness when it would have been easier to walk past. The city, once blind in its own way, had learned to stop, even if only for a moment, to look at one another, to see.
And so, the orphan who had nothing became the boy who gave the world its sight, proving that sometimes the richest hearts belong to those who carry no coins at all.